Hello arty peoples and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein and I am your host this evening. Now tonight I have a really fun class planned for you guys which we're going to be using acrylic paints. So for all you acrylic painters out there, this is a really fun technique that is a little bit on the slower side, but it really helps you kind of layer your colors and build your layers up to achieve all the variations that help you to paint hair. Today you're painting hair. So I am specifically only using acrylics today. I did have a previous class, oh man, ages ago, I don't know, 4 years ago I think, where I was using oils, watercolors, and acrylics, and I briefly touched on the different ways of painting hair. But today I wanted to get back into the acrylic version and kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive for that, just because it is such a long process, but it really is quite a lovely way of approaching acrylic paints. Now, I want to talk to you guys first about the types of acrylic paint that this is going to work well for. On the table here I have the Lucas Acrylic Studio. These are the ones we have clearly in our studio. I got paint all over this one, but these are the ones we use all the time here. It's a soft body paint. Now when I say soft body in the realm of acrylics, that means that it's not really thick and it's not really thin. It's kind of smack in the middle. So soft body is a really great one to use. It's kind of a catch-all for the different techniques that you can do. It does retain some brush strokes, but within the medium that we're going to be using today, as well as maybe even a little bit of water, that will thin it down a bit. Now I will also say you can also do this technique with the more fluid acrylics. You can definitely go more towards that side of the viscosity, but I definitely would not try to do this with thicker acrylics, or you're going to end up with a lot of really thick textural, because this is a lot of layers that we're going to be working on. So you might be able to do that. If you do try this, let me know. I want to see it. Post it to our Facebook group, Jerry's Live Facebook group. It's free to join. Just make sure you answer that one security question. So I've never personally done it with a thicker acrylic. I feel like that would be harder to control, the thickness and that texture, and it would be a whole different thing. So try and stick with the middle kind of thickness and then thinner. And then as far as colors are concerned, let's actually go to that overhead camera here and I can show you guys kind of what I have on the table. So up here I actually have our it's the mixing set of 9. So this is like a basic color, a basic variety of colors that you'll get in any kind of a set of acrylics. You got white, which is titanium white, a cadmium yellow hue, cadmium red deep hue, sorry, alizarin crimson, permanent violet, ultramarine, viridian phthalo, a yellow ochre, and then over here I have an iron oxide black. That's a pretty standard set of colors. And I will show you guys how to actually use this to get a lot of different varieties for approaching hair in a naturalistic kind of way. Now the ones down here are the ones that are kind of additions that I would highly recommend if you're painting a lot of portraiture or even animal portraits and you're trying to achieve those naturalistic tones and values and colors. This is a wonderful, I don't want to say cheat sheet method, but you might as well just get the colors and go straight from there and work your way that way. But the ones that I have on here, this is just the variety of browns other than like the yellow ochre that I have on the table. This is just the other variety of browns that Lucas had within this line alone. You can use any kind of color of like naturalistic browns, but again, I'll show you how to use these other funky colors incorporated with it too. But over here we have a terracotta. We have burnt sienna, which is one of my favorites. We have raw sienna, a caramel, or caramel, depending on how you guys want to argue about pronouncing it. Tell me in the chats which way you go, which is going to be hilarious to try and read back in type. Anyway, brown ochre. Then we have a raw umber, which is also another one of my favorites, as well as the burnt umber. These two and burnt sienna are the ones that I grab a lot. Those are really great additions to these colors if you don't want to get all of them, but there's no rhyme or reason as far as like what colors you really specifically have to work with. I've also done this technique with fluorescent colors, which are really fun, and it turned out like a really interesting little silly kind of painting. So those are the paints that we're using. Now I'm going to put these off to the side. And of course, as we go through this process, if you do have any questions, make sure to ask them in the chats. I have amazing moderators who are monitoring Facebook and YouTube and all the other platforms for you guys. And we'll ask your question while we're live, so that way it can get answered. Now, as far as mediums are concerned, I'm going to be using the Liquitex glazing medium. Any kind of glazing medium will do. It's a really good way to thin down the opacity of your paints, so it'll go from either really opaque to a more transparent, or just kind of bring it down in general to where it's not as strong. And I'll show you kind of why we're going to be doing that later on. But it won't actually ruin the adhesion bond of your acrylics. So if you take an acrylic and you mix a ton of water in and get like a thinner viscosity, you are now taking all of that acrylic polymers and spreading them really far away from each other and kind of weakening the bond. Like if you were to take glue and add a ton of water to it, it's now a really, really weak glue. So it's the same kind of idea. So instead of reaching for water, I'm going to reach for a glazing medium. If you want a thinner viscosity, there's also other mediums like an airbrush medium, which is also the same kind of concept where it's an acrylic polymer, just on the thinner side, but I'm using this one. It's kind of the same viscosity as the paints that I'm working with here. Now, as far as brushes are concerned, I can quickly go over that. I have the, actually let me lay those flat. I have the Pro Stroke. This is the Power Krill. These are a really wonderful acrylic brush. I have the short handle brushes here just because I'm working on a table and working flat. The short handle works really well for that. Now if you work at an easel, a longer handle brush might be easier for you. For this technique, I tend to choke up really close to the ferrule of the brush just because I like a lot of control. So that's why I usually opt for a short handle brush because I don't need a long handle just floating off over here. But this has a good variety of the different brushes, sizes and shapes. I am going to use, other than just my rounds, I'm definitely going to be using my rounds, but I'm going to use a couple of the other ones, probably this flat right here to start with. But I really love that this case that it comes with does Velcro up to where now I have a little stand. I can set that off to the side and have that available for me to just grab and go. Now, the other brushes that I threw in the teacher's cart, these are technically for watercolor. These are the script liners. They are really, really long, thin, round kind of brushes. They are really great for when you're painting hair. These are really, really fantastic, and I'll show you a couple of like little strokes where I use those as well. I tend to use those at the very end though. Now, we are going to be painting hair. So I have a couple of examples set for you guys, and I have my reference photos that I was working off of, and I'll kind of, if you are interested in any of the references that I'm using, they have them, the links as well, and they'll pop them in the chats for you guys. But any of these little squares that I show you guys, essentially this is the blank square straight from, you know, getting it from Jerry's. So this has absolutely nothing on it. This is my first layer right here. This is a couple of layers right here. And then this is like fully finished. So that way you guys can kind of see the progression of absolutely nothing to using a couple of brush strokes to start kind of laying down where everything goes and kind of killing the white of my canvas, and then starting to layer, and then eventually getting to this. Now we are going to slowly build up and try to get to here and show you a couple of the steps along the way. So let me kind of get started. Now with this one, anytime I'm working off of hair, I try to look at the basic color of the hair. For me, I am a natural redhead, but I have crazy colors in my hair normally most of the time. And it can range from really vibrant to really dull like it is right now because, you know, my hair happens to be fading. So anytime you're looking at that, the base color that I start is the darkest kind of tone that I can see peeking throughout all these little individual strands of like really bright blonde, right? So for this hair, I actually really love this raw umber. That dark, really neutral brown. I can see kind of almost in her like the roots, kind of an area is a really good indicator of what color to start with. The reason why is because we want to start with really dark and we want to layer those lights back on, right? So I don't go crazy dark to begin with, just because I'm kind of trying to lay down the flow of the hair as well. I don't need a ton of acrylic because we're not painting a massive area right in here, but I am going to need this glazing medium every time. It's very difficult to open that. And I don't need a ton of that either. And yes, it is like a milky white that will dry clear, like absolutely clear. That's just what acrylic polymer does. You have a question?
Yes, I have a couple.
Okay.
The first one is in relation to the acrylic bottles. Is there something on there that kind of tells you the viscosity or how thick it is?
Usually you can find it within our description on the website. We try and tell you whether or not it's a fluid, whether or not it's a heavy body. If you see the word heavy body, that usually means it's really thick. This is a soft body, so right now I squirted out a blob of paint and it's not flattening out. It's kind of right in the middle. Now, as that dries, usually a soft body, it restricts and it kind of flattens itself back out. Whereas like a heavy body or a thicker viscosity paint, usually they are formulated to retain those brush strokes. So it doesn't contract as much. Now it might contract a bit, but this one's going to definitely try and self-level itself out to a point. If you use a really fluid or high flow, anytime you see those words, those usually mean that it's going to be thin like water. And if you ever have a question, all you have to do is reach out to us. We will absolutely be happy to answer those questions for you. We have customer service online all the time. If you have any questions on our videos, we try to make sure we come back and answer those as well. So, do we have another question though?
Yes.
Yes.
This method, is this method transferable into oils?
Kind of. You can technically use this method for oils. The problem being is that oils don't dry as fast as acrylics. So the reason why this works really well for acrylics is because I can do quite a few layers, wait a minute, and then it'll be ready for the next layer. The way that I work with this and doing those layers, I don't want those initial layers to move on me. So with oils, it would be kind of like you do the layers and then if you go to work back into them, you would be moving everything around. Granted, keeping that in mind, like you could do probably the first initial layer, do a couple layers, let this dry. And I mean, that would probably take about a week to a month, depending on how thick you're painting. And if you're using any kind of a drier agent, that might go a little faster. But then at that point, you might be able to do this and kind of layer on top of that. But perhaps I will mess around with that and have another show. If you're interested in trying to see me translate this process into oils, into another Jerry's Live show, let me know in the comments. All right, so I have my raw umber. I'm gonna kind of keep this over here. Raw umber, now straight out of the tube. It's really dark and really thick, right? If I go to brush this on, it's gonna be really, really opaque. So if I take my glazing medium and mix that in, you see the difference? I can start seeing my brush strokes through it, which is exactly what I want. And if you're really timid about this process, you can mix quite a lot of glazing medium in and kind of really slowly go through this process. The slower you go, the more realistic it's actually going to look. Now I'm probably going to end up with getting some of the paint on my paper, so I'm going to kind of try and move this off the way, or out of the way for a second. But when it comes to painting, now I'm starting off with pretty straight hair right here. I'm not paying attention to the curls down here. I just really wanted to kind of work sort of within this area right here. You can sort of see how I have that like V of darkness, kind of almost like she has right here. And so I'm trying to pay attention to the flow of her hair. She has really straight, long hair. So my brush strokes should mimic that, right? I'm not trying to like do one of those. That's not going to help me in the long run. Long brush strokes for long straight hair. And so that would be my first initial layer, is just to kind of kill the white of my canvas. I'm toning it, as well as trying to get the flow of the hair. Now, if I decide that she has maybe some hairs that go a little off and kind of curl in just slightly, it's still really long and straight, but I only have a certain amount of time that I can work with this and work into that layer, because this is acrylics and it will become sticky. And if I try to go in there any further than this, it's going to start picking up and kind of dragging and doing funny things. So there is like a work time with it within this, because it is such a thin layer, right? So that is my first initial layer. Now, after that, I probably won't be working with this brush very often. So I'm just going to clean it. Now, if you are painting a smaller area, of course, use a smaller brush. You know, this might be more appropriate if your head is going to be even like this size. I would work with maybe this size brush. So if this is the size of your painting, try and work as large as you can, but something like this might be really hard for you to control where everything's going. So maybe if you go with a smaller brush, but still on the larger side, because if you try to start painting something even this size with a brush like this, you're gonna drive yourself insane. So go as large as you can, but you still have to be kind of comfortable in controlling your brush. So that layer is pretty much dry. There's a little spot where it's still just a touch wet, but that's pretty much the first layer. Now, this is where I start layering in color and variety of tones, just to kind of build up my shadow areas and start forming where my hair is kind of flowing. And this is where I will start reaching for those round brushes, right? I'm gonna go as big as I can, because I have these 3 sizes within my set, right? I'm gonna go as big as I can, and if that's uncomfortable, I'll switch down to a smaller size, right? Keep those over here too. So I'm currently working with a size 6 round in the Power Acryl. I forgot to get the starch off of this one. Sorry. Always make sure you wash the starch off of your brushes. And that's why they're crispy when they first get to you, because it has starch on the bristles. So, all right, now, if I want to thin this viscosity down, I can reach for more of my my glazing medium. Well, that'll thin my opacity down, but if I want to thin the viscosity down, I can reach for just a touch of water, or like an airbrush medium, or something where it's a little bit more fluid. Now when I say a touch of water, I mean my brush is wet, and that is enough for me to kind of work with. I really don't want a ton of water in here, and the reason why is because it will kill the adhesion of your paint, right? Now, this is where I usually use my pinky on the table to help me kind of balance my hand. Otherwise, you can get like a leaning bridge, which is really nice. It's a clear acrylic kind of bridge to rest your hand on. Or I always put my hand down and rest my hand, my other hand, my dominant hand that's painting, on my fist, just to kind of give me some balance, right? Now, the only reason why I'm doing this is because these are long, thin strands of hair. I want to do long pulls of color, and I want to try and be as like kind of balanced and what's the word I'm looking for? The like smooth. Thank you, Michaelia. I want to be as smooth as possible when I'm pulling this through her hair. Now, the reason why I want to also keep my reference photo here is because if this is the area where I had that little dark patch of hair come through, then I want to kind of pay attention to where the other patches of darkness are in her hair. I mean, I guess it's kind of here. And I'm not being super precious with this, but I'm trying to make it as smooth as possible. Right? Just to kind of darken those areas. And you see I'm not putting down really thick, really opaque layers, because I'm just trying to find the form of her hair. Now, with that being said, there are some like reds that kind of run through her hair a little bit. You can sort of see a little bit more of that kind of coming through where her hair is curling down here. And if you want the reference photo and you can see it really up close and really high definition, you can download it from those links that we put in the chat. But I can see some more in like that area right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab that burnt sienna, which is a really lovely kind of reddish brown. Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one is, how do you keep your paint from drying out on your palette when it's brushed out so thinly?
I don't. So the reason why I don't mind if my paint dries out a ton, in these blobs, they're going to stay wet because there's a lot of paint all accumulated in one little area. So it might form a skin on the outside, but I can break through that and get to the wet paint inside. This over here where I'm mixing very specific colors together, I don't mind if that dries because I can always mix that again. It might not be exactly perfect, but that works really, really well with trying to accomplish naturalistic hair tones. There's gonna be a lot of variations. They might be really similar, but you don't wanna have just a flat kind of one single color if you're trying to paint it more naturalistically. Like it's just not going to work in the realm of like natural hair. Right, so now I just kind of warmed that up a bit. And I'm just gonna leave this side up here. Right, so now we're warming it up. We have our darks established and I'm starting to get those streaks that are kind of reminiscent of hair. Right, and we're gonna move over here and we're gonna start doing those thinner layers where we're gonna start building up those lighter colors. You have another question?
Can you just remind us what that purpley color is?
That purple is Permanent Violet from Lucas Krill Studio. This one right here. It's a really pretty purple. All right, so now that I'm gonna start getting into more details, I'm grabbing a smaller brush. So this is like our darks are more established. Now we can always go back and darken them and get them even deeper, but right now I wanna kind of start getting a little bit lighter. Now, I could reach for titanium white, and I am going to put that on my palette here, but I'm not going to reach for it just yet. What I'm going to actually reach for is a yellow ochre, because right next to that, this is going to look a lot lighter, right? I don't need a white to lighten everything just yet. I'm still going to stay in that realm of like the browns and kind of naturalistic tones. All right, so as I'm mixing my color, I usually mix it up, and if you want to try and keep as much of it wet as possible, you can kind of try and puddle it together in on itself, and then I just kind of twist my round brushes just to get my point back. You want a good pointy brush for this. The other thing that also really works is if you end up with like a flat brush that is really worn and kind of has all those little bristles that are flailed out and kind of, it's a really gross brush. Those are the best for hair. You have all those crazy little hairs that are flying off of it and you just kind of drag it through and it looks really naturalistic because you don't know where the paint's going. It's just gonna kind of happenstance. But it's one of those things where it's kind of wonderful how well those work. Okay, so I'm gonna start dragging this through and giving myself some lighter kind of yellowish tones, which it's not really crazy bright, but it has a yellower kind of tone to it. And because it's not bright enough, this is where actually I am gonna take back my words. I'm gonna use a little bit more yellow ochre, a little less of my glazing medium, and just a touch of titanium white. We have a question?
Yeah, we were wondering if these brushes are bristle, the Power Acrylic.
That's a really great question. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
There's 3 different filaments of synthetic. There's 3 different sizes of synthetic filament. I can speak, geez. But they're not quite as. We don't know how to explain them.
So we were hoping that you did.
Yeah. So they're not quite as stiff as the bristle brushes.
No, they're definitely, so the way that I would describe this is it is, because that's what I couldn't remember is whether or not it was synthetic. I was assuming it was synthetic because it feels synthetic, a little plasticky, but it has a lot of snap. It will snap back to its original position really fast, but it's not like a wild boar hair brush where it's really stiff and like it doesn't have that gritty feel. That's the best way I can say this.
We were talking about it amongst
Gritty.
ourselves and we couldn't figure out the best way to explain it.
They're still smooth like a synthetic brush would be,
Yeah.
but not as soft.
Okay. So you can see I'm starting to build up the lightness in this right here. And because I'm working in a transparent color, because of that glazing medium, this is going to be a slow build. This is one of those things where this is a slower process, but the end result makes it look like real hair that's sitting on your canvas. Right? So we're getting those variations and we're starting to pull the lights back out of that dark area, right? Now, the more steps you have in between all of these different tones, the more realistic this is gonna look. But I'm gonna kind of jump ahead because I have other things to show you. And then I'm gonna kind of show you a couple of highlight strands. Now, if it's not perfect, it's okay. If you see how I just got my flat brush that just kind of went a little flat, or my brush kind of hit the edge and flicked and left a really big area of color. As long as you get to it fast, you can kind of wipe it away. If you don't like something, you can also kind of wipe it away. The reason why I love these paints right here is because I know they're non-toxic and I just use my finger to just quickly touch it and it's gone, right? If I also really don't like it and I didn't get to it fast enough, you can always paint it over. Acrylics are very forgiving like that. Now, the lighter your hair is, or the lighter that color kind of appears, that's more light is hitting it, right? So now it just looks like that light is kind of just hitting that one edge of the hair. Do you have a question?
Yes. Besides the brushes that you washed the starch out of, are you mostly using dry brushes?
It's not dry because the acrylic paint is wet, and I'm also dipping in a little bit of water. So like I just dipped into water just to thin out the viscosity of my paint. Honestly, once I get acrylic on my brush, I don't usually consider it dry, but yes, I'm not getting it wet before I dip it into paint, but you can if you want to. It's going to be personal preference on that point. We have another question?
Sherry's wondering if this technique would translate to painting a bird or a pile of sticks, or if that would be a different class.
So this, yes, this technique applies to painting everything with acrylics, really. The only thing you need to pay attention to at that point is your brush shape and your brush stroke. If you're painting like alligator skin, getting a flat brush like this might be really great, because then you can layer it and kind of change the shape of your brush and even start using a round for like the little kind of ridges that happen in there. But this is the exact same way that you can do this and start with a really dark green and then build up those colors that way. Now, I'm gonna actually go straight to kind of a more, I'm using that burnt sienna, this yellow ochre, and the white. Definitely still want some of that glazing medium for that transparency. But I'm gonna actually switch over to my smallest round brush. I didn't dip it in water, but I actually kind of will, because I want to thin out down the viscosity just a little bit. I'm going to do just a couple of last minute hairs here, just so you guys can see how that builds up. Now, the great thing about the lighter colors is that it doesn't actually have to hit the whole strand. It can actually start halfway through because if the light's hitting just this like little area, this is telling me that that hair is kind of coming out and forward and getting light on it more than the others. Right? Just like that. And then we can build up our layers slowly and slowly. And the best part is that if you really want to make it look really naturalistic, don't make all the hair perfect. You have to have at least 1 or 2 strands that go off and be wonky. Just that single little strand going off that way makes it look like it's a naturalistic kind of weird hair that just decided that it's just gonna flutter off. Because we have those weird hairs that kind of, you never get your hair to do the thing that you want. That's why mine's in a messy bun right now, because there's no containing this sometimes. It happens. But that is the straight kind of blonde tone hair. Any more questions with this specific right now? Because I have wavy hair and curly hair that I want to show you guys as well as different colors. So I'm gonna put this out of the way, and we have some red hair. I had to include red hair. All right, so with this, I have a fun wavy, look at her beautiful hair. I'm not convinced that's not a wig, but it's absolutely gorgeous. So with this, the process is the exact same. The only difference is that I'm going to change how I paint physically with my brush strokes, right? So this one, I honestly was having a hard time trying to remember what color I used. I think it was burnt sienna. I could be completely wrong. Usually I start with burnt sienna. We're going to start with burnt sienna. I can't remember. If it's wrong, that's okay. So with this, because of the way that her hair is flowing, again, going with a big, thick brush as big as I can. And we're going to kind of just, it was burnt sienna. Huh, look at that. We're going to kind of work with the waves of her hair and kind of go with the way that her hair is naturally flowing. Maybe this one bends a little bit more. Again, you have some work time, and if it's not perfect, that's okay, because we're going to cover this up, really. You see how mine's starting to pick up and get weird? I'm losing that sweet spot where it's workable, and it's starting to dry on me. This is acrylic, it dries fast, which is okay, right? All right, so in a minute that'll be dry. But we're going to start with the next couple of layers, which is the dark of her hair. Another reason why I went with burnt sienna, because it's really red, really warm. It's absolutely stunning, but you can see there's some dark areas in here, which you can see I got here, and that is how I got, I think actually that one I went with burnt umber, not raw umber, burnt umber, because anytime you see the word burnt on a color, that means that it's literally been roasted, the pigment, and it usually means it has a warmer tone to it. So, go with that burnt umber. And if I wanted to, I could also mix in a little bit of the alizarin crimson, which would be really lovely, as well as that purple. Now this one, I don't remember where I was painting, honestly. I think right here. Like I think that little dark patch right here is this one. So we're just going to go with that. So that one, you can actually see like a lot of this is in shadow. So I'm going to say that that shadow kind of starts here. I think I did actually use some purple in the initial couple of layers there. Maybe even add in some of that burnt sienna just to make it a little bit warmer. And now I need some glazing medium. Okay. Yeah, somewhere in there-ish, right? And then she has a chunk of hair that sort of gets wider there and thinner over there, and we're gonna sort of make this up, but then there's a dark area here. See how that's not going at all with what I initially painted with that first layer? That's okay. That works because I'm finding the form of her hair. And if I don't love this, I can always start over again. Yeah, we're gonna say about like that. Now, I'm still going to layer in these areas too, because even in the light areas, there's still these little dark areas that kind of peek through. That's why I have those dark areas and I'm building up those lighter layers on top. It gives it variation and visual interest, where it's not just a light color and that's it. There's those darks that are peeking through in the little corners. Now, if you get really comfortable with this process, you might be able to find some shorthands, kind of ways of doing this, and cheat sheet kind of methods where you can make this process go faster for you. That is entirely up to you to find and make decisions like that. There are no wrong ways of doing this at all. Alright, so kind of build it up like that. As long as I'm always going with sort of the way of the hair that I have decided is flowing around, right? Now, with this one, instead of reaching for white again, I'm going to go with like a yellow ochre and burnt sienna kind of type. Another really good combination of color is like a yellow and like a really lighter red, one that doesn't lean purple, but it leans kind of neutral or kind of on the orangey side. Because with redheads, as light hits their hair, it goes brighter, kind of in the orange realm. I'm kind of trying to see what I'm painting here. Okay, so I'm going to say there's light here. And with this, you can see as the hair bumps out, it's in light. As it goes in, it's darker. So I'm going to try and just hit those little areas that are bumping out and leave the other areas alone. And that wasn't completely dry, and I picked up some of that dark purple. That's okay. It'll mix right in. Alright, get a little bit of glaze here. Alright. So that there's light over here too. Alright, and I am going to actually grab a little bit of this yellow and red. Alright, make almost like an orangey color. Clearly need to get more of this paint because we use it a lot. Alright, so keep going on the layers, and because yellow is a pretty transparent color, and I'm using quite a lot of it, I'm not actually mixing any glazing medium in. This is understanding how transparent or opaque your colors are. Sometimes you don't actually need to use the glazing medium at all if you work with pretty transparent colors to begin with. Right, then eventually when we get lighter and lighter, we're going to say light over here. Kind of try and focus on this little area so that I can get through this one and get to the last few that we have. And then you can build up your layers that way. Oop, didn't realize you went to that side camera. How lovely. right? And again, with this process, I would still gravitate towards smaller brushes as you go into the further layers, and then always have those little flyaways that just kind of don't go with the flow of the hair. There's a couple, actually, even if you see in here, that just went kind of crisscrossy and went just a little haywire. Hair does that. It gets, you can see all the different little flyaways that go in here if you guys are looking at that photo on your computers. But that is the red hair. I'm going to leave it at this. It's the exact same process as the blonde. I just want to make sure that we get to the next couple of examples. Yes?
Someone was asking, what is your approach for areas where the hair is only partially going over the background? Do you have any advice on that?
Oh, I do. And you know what? Let me do that with this, because this will be a really good example, right? I have this lovely lady here who had that exact thing happen with her hair. Now, I understand this is reading really, really dark on camera. I can see more detail that you guys probably can just because of the way that the camera is going to pick it up and versus my eye. But this is an image where, again, you guys can check out those links and look at this on your computer in high resolution, and you can see all the little hairs and everything and how kind of it's going over the background, and she's got a lot of little flyaways that happen. And I will work on that for this one. Now, there's a lot going on in the background. I'm going to simplify it and make it one solid color. And let me actually do that now. I'm going to go with a lighter version of the phthalo. We're going to make it really a light mint. How about that? So we can really see the difference. Great question. Right? So I'm going to actually just say, here's the background color. Again, this is how forgiving acrylics are. I love it. I'm not going to be really precious about the background. We're just going to kind of pretend like that's it, right? Clean off my brush. Okay, so with this hair, when it comes to painting hair over the background, I would always paint your background first. Reason why is because it's a lot easier to paint your hair on top of the background rather than try and carve your background over each and every little hair. Because, like, say I take this and I decide that there's a curl that goes like this. Let me actually, right? You can kind of carve your background out around the object to a point, right? I'm kind of just making this up, so we're going to just keep it really curly. You can sort of carve it around. Can't carve it around every single individual little hair, but usually when it comes to painting the background, I usually just paint it first and I go wild with it and I don't worry about my edges because I paint the hair on top of it. Now with this hair, I actually went with a combination of the raw umber and black just because her hair is so dark. It almost reads as just a pure black. I didn't want to go pure black just because I didn't want to build it up that fast, but I did use quite a lot of black. But I essentially made like a really, really dark brown. Now I'm still using the exact same process of using the glazing medium just to kind of break it down and get kind of some variations. You can use a round brush or a flat brush for this, depending on what you're more comfortable with. And the reason why I say that with this particular hair is because there's a lot of movement and a lot of like variations on how the hair is turning. So a round brush might be more comfortable for you. So if I have that happen, I'm pretty much zigzagging her hair. Now, if you have a flat brush, you can do the exact same thing and just kind of zigzag it and make sure you're kind of building up that texture. And again, if you are paying attention, I'm actually not looking at the picture at this point. If you're paying attention to kind of the way that her hair is flowing, you can do that and kind of follow the flow of her hair. At this point, I'm just kind of making it up, so we're just going to kind of give her some curls up here, and I'm going to kind of try and carve it out a little bit more up here. Now, when it comes to painting over background, because her hair has a lot of volume and a lot of texture, and curls will stack on top of one another, but they don't do it nicely. When I say nicely, I mean like it's not just like a perfect little stack of curls and you can't see through them. Like her curls might go up and down and like have like a strand that kind of does that, you know? It's not perfect in the sense of like stick straight hair is just gonna all kind of lay on top of each other really nice and like smooth. That makes sense? This is gonna have a lot of texture. I don't want to say nicely, like it's beautiful hair. Make sure that everyone understands that's not what I meant. But like it has some volume and it's going to kind of go over the background. And so you're going to have these little areas where the background's probably going to peek through, right? Then from there, the process is the exact same. We're gonna slowly build up those colors. I'm going to actually, with this one, stick with the black and the dark brown. You can definitely add some purple in there if you want to start deepening your shadows and kind of give a variation of color, which is really lovely. Darker hair tends to lean towards purples and blues, even in the highlights, like over here with her hair. That curl that's going over across her eye right here has a lot of blue highlights. Which is quite pretty, right? And as long as you're building this texture, it's going to appear nice and naturalistic. I just kind of got over that. Oops. All right. Now, this is where I will start reaching for white, but I still want to keep it nice and warm. So maybe I'll add a little bit of that yellow ochre. And I'm going to start trying to pull these curls out. Now, with these, sometimes the light hits the whole curl and you can see the whole thing spiral. Sometimes it only hits like the one kind of side that's curling out. I would suggest you just look at what is happening in your photo reference, because it can vary so much. But as long as you're going with the way that the curl is kind of getting the light hit on it, which I also need some blue. Gonna need blue. Okay, there we go. This is the ultramarine, because I want to make that kind of a cooler light blue. And this is where I probably should switch to a smaller brush. And this isn't dry, what I brushed on there already, but I'm just picking out little areas of curls that are hitting the light. I'm actually going to go with a smaller brush here. Getting a little bit of water on there just to thin down the viscosity. That was too much. If there's ever too much water on your brush, when you go to thin down the viscosity, add more paint. That's why I have the blob of paint over on the one side, and then I have the mixture kind of more towards the center. I always have like it a little bit separated, so I'm not always mixing everything all at once. I'm going to try it. Actually, let's go to that side camera so I can kind of get a little bit closer and not get my head in the camera. There we go. Let me pull this over here. So I might have my brush just kind of follow that a little bit. Because I'm not using pure white or anything, I can kind of pick out some of those little like shapes and kind of start building those curls just like that, right? And making them a little bit wider. Now over here, where we were talking about this, I have some areas that I don't love, and I got a little too light, right? So now I'm going to take that black and that raw umber mixture, and I'm going to go backwards. This is the beauty of acrylic. If you went too light, you can always take it back. I'll also start pulling some of those flyaway hairs out, because this is how you paint naturalistic hair over the background. Here, I'm going to actually turn this a little bit just like that, so hopefully this will focus a little bit better, right? So I think I went too light here, but then I can always go backwards, you know, backwards, forward, build the layers. Build your little flyaways. And then when it comes to like the end of your hair right here, I always have little hairs that always kind of go off in every which direction. Because with curls, it's never really uniform. They're kind of all over the place most of the time. And you can build it up this way. Now, eventually when it comes to the highlights, again, it's not all over the hair. It's going to hit just little spots on the hair. Just so we can get some little highlights here and there. Usually you see it on one side of the curl, not both, if that makes any sense. And then, of course, actually I'm going to grab my smallest little brush here. You have a question?
Yes, and I think you're about to start doing those teeny tiny hairs,
Yes,
right?
that's what I was about to do.
Can you describe the viscosity of the paint for that specific technique, the tiniest?
I try to keep it pretty fluid. So I do add a little bit of water just to kind of keep it on the fluid side. Again, the fluid paints are really good for this specific, the teeny tiny little hairs, because it just flows better off your brush. Hopefully you guys are going to be able to see this. There we go. Sometimes you don't get a perfect little flow of hair happening. Sometimes it kind of, your brush tends to jump sometimes. Do your best to kind of line it back up. And this is what happens with hair. They just have those little hairs that kind of go out and do weird things sometimes. Sometimes you'll have a chunk of hair that kind of joins up with the hair. It's a little bit thicker. Is this part of the show where everyone's just watching me paint? So yeah, this is kind of how I approach, especially curly hair, because it's just so much fun. And then of course, don't forget, like in these little areas where you have it kind of crisscrossing, you have hairs there too. But that's kind of how I approach painting it on the background. Do the chunk of hair as the big area that you're painting, and then do those little flyaways over top of the background, and you should be good. Now, if you're translating this to oil, make sure all of that dries before you try and get those little hairs. Otherwise, you're going to be painting back into your background, and it's going to be a little frustrating. So that is really curly, really dark hair. And I have one more example, because it's not just all about human hair. Sometimes we gotta paint animals too, right? So I got those cute little, he's so adorable, little nose. I actually cropped this in quite a bit just so I could see this. I wanted to actually paint this specifically because not only is it short hair, it goes from dark brownish, reddish kind of tinge to also those really like white areas, little spots. So that's what I'm painting. If you can't tell, it's kind of this area right here. So when painting Bambi's butt, essentially, it's the exact same process. Now let me get all my brushes over here kind of clean, and while I'm doing this, if there are any questions, now's a great time to ask, because I'm realizing we're also kind of running out of time. Now, here's the one thing that I did want to show you guys, the difference between, let's see what I got here. Okay, so the difference between, with this, all the hairs that I was painting over here, I was using all the different browns that I had available to me, and I wasn't using the mixing set as much, right? With painting the animal hair, other than grabbing, I think it was burnt umber as my base, I did not use any of those browns at all. I relied specifically on the mixing set. Now that means I'm going to have to pay attention to my colors. I'm going to have to know color theory and understand what I'm going to do to make a brown. And whenever it comes to making brown, or what we say making mud, is if you're mixing two colors opposite on the color wheel, you're going to get a brown. So the purple mixed with yellow ochre, or the purple mixed with the cadmium yellow, they will give you two different browns. The blue and if you mix your orange, also a different brown. The green and the reds, you might have to add a little bit of yellow to this just because this is viridian and not like a green. But that's one of those things that if you start mixing your colors and playing around with your mixtures, you can understand how to make different variations of brown. They are mixtures. They're never going to get to the same kind of purity of the other browns we had available. But you get these really beautiful kind of tones, right? Like I said, I did use the burnt umber as my base, but that was it. All these other variations is like the yellow mixed with a little bit of the white, mixed with a little bit of that alizarin crimson to make it kind of on the pinker side. There's the blues and the purples kind of coming through for the spots where, honestly, if I left it like this, it looks like it's turning into shadow. But this is kind of the variation that you can get when you start mixing with color and not just naturalistic colors. I feel like this is just so much more fun and gives you so much more variation and visual interest. I'm also one of those painters that I love color. I love crazy colors. I also paint with fluorescence all the time, so I might be a little biased, but you know, it's really fun. So let me grab burnt umber and kind of show you how to approach this one. It's again, very same process. We're gonna grab our paint. Pretty sure it's burnt umber that I used. And that glazing medium. And with this one, I'm paying attention again to the way that the hair is flowing on the body, but that is not the color I used. We're gonna use a little bit of burnt sienna in there. I might have done a burnt umber and burnt sienna combo. It's been a minute since I painted this, I'm sorry. That was it. Those two mixed together. And again, I'm using a big flat brush. I'm not super worried about it, but I'm just kind of trying to get like the way that the hair is flowing on the body. Now, this is short hair. I'm using short little brush strokes just to kind of mimic the texture of this animal's hair. What's really cool is that if you do this process for like animal portraiture, like your dogs or anything, and you pay attention to the way that it flows around the face, it changes directions so many times, but if you get those directional changes of the hair and you get the way that the color and the color sits on the face, it looks so good. Okay, so quickly going to add in some of this purple and kind of give you some variations of where this shadow is, just like I did with the other ones. That is still very wet. Now, this is what I'm talking about with shorthand. If you find that you don't need to go as transparent as you first initially do when you start this process, you can go a little bit more opaque with the shadows. That definitely works. It's nice because for the transparency, because if you decide that you've made a mistake, it's a little bit easier to like undo. But again, it's also such a forgiving medium that you can always just paint over top of it. Right. Short little brush strokes, right? Now with this, I feel like I'm gonna start making up these colors, and it's gonna be slightly different because I, again, don't have all of the colors that I used on here on my palette, and I can't 100% remember what I did. If you ever are in the middle of a painting and you're not quite sure what you mixed, always write it down. It doesn't hurt. But I have variations of mixtures that I use all the time. So like, usually pretty good at picking out what I did. Yeah. But short little brush strokes like this will get you the texture, and you can start building up just like we did with the red hair and getting those curls. You can start building up where the hair kind of curls around those little like white spots. I'm gonna use that yellow ochre, a little bit of the, ooh, that white was too much. So if I use this yellow ochre right where that is kind of coming over, I can sort of build that up. We're going to kind of focus on this just so I know we're kind of running out of time, but I want to show you guys this. Maybe I'll just work on this one little spot so you can really see. Because I wanted to also show you how to approach white fur, because that's very different. I'm going to skip quite a few steps here and just go straight with the lighter one. Again, the more layers you add, the more realistic this is going to look. But I'm not obliterating all those little layers underneath, because especially with animal fur, you can really see those dark tones kind of shine through. I'm going to switch brushes, and I'm going to start approaching this white area, right? Now for the darks of where I kind of laid out the white spots, what I actually did originally was I actually laid it out with just the purple, the dark purple. Like say that there's a white spot that's like sort of right here. I laid it out like this. Now the reason why I laid it out in the dark purple, it's supposed to be a white spot. Why did I go the exact opposite? I can always fix this if I decide that this spot is a little too close or too far or wherever it may be, because I actually did that over here with these spots. I ended up having them way too high, and I had them almost all kind of right here, and I was like, that's in the wrong area. I have to bring them down. So that was very easy for me to correct. If I went straight in with those lighter colors, it would have been harder. So the next step with the white fur is if I mix up a little bit of the blue with the purple. I make Amanda's favorite color, because I add a little bit of the titanium white, again a little bit of the glazing medium, maybe a little bit of water. Just dip the tip of my brush in water and put it right back in there. So this is where I start pulling out the light areas of where my white fur is going to go. Again, this is still really dark, but that's okay because I will build it up, right? And I probably went a little bit lighter with the initial layer that you guys can see there, because the next step is a really light blue. And when I say really light blue, I mean like it's a really pretty like baby blue. A little glazy medium, a little bit of water. Just a teeny tiny amount. That's really loaded, so I'm going to actually take my, if I ever get too much paint on my brush and I just don't want to like completely clean it off and I just want to kind of remove a lot of that paint, I just kind of cup it in my paper towel or like a cleaning rag and just kind of pull off a lot of that. I'm going to work back up here. So this is where I actually need to be paying attention to where my little brush strokes are going. Because I can just have a little bit of this fur change color from like that dark brown over to a little white spot. Right, now if I decide that's still not bright enough, because this is a perfect color for if your animal is in shadow. It's not white, it is like a light blue, but it looks like it's in shadow compared to over here, right? If I want to make it look like it's in light, I'm going to clean off my brush and I'm going to make a really, really light yellow. Like a little cream kind of color. That cadmium yellow light hue is perfect for this. You can also use the yellow ochre if you want it a little bit more naturalistic. And I mean a little bit of yellow goes a long way. You really don't need a whole lot. Because this will be our last little spot that we touch on. So if I want to make this look like it's in light, I'll add a little bit of yellow, because sunshine is nice and warm, it's a yellow light, and so when you add a little bit of yellow to things, it makes it look like it's in sunshine. Just like that. Ta-da! It's magic, isn't it? Now if I also want to do the same thing with the hair around here, I can also start building up those layers to have those lighter colors. It's one of those slow process buildups, but you can absolutely get from this area to over here if you just start adding in warmer colors, lighter colors, and you don't have to paint and obliterate everything that you've already done. You just add a little hairs here and there, and if you decide that it needs more light, you just build it up and keep going. Magic. Magic of painting hair. So do we have any last minute questions? I know we're pretty much out of time, because time flies when you're painting hair, right? Crazy. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. That was our Jerry's Live show. Of course, if you have any questions about painting hair in the future, or if you're watching this in the future and you want to ask me some questions, make sure you ask it in the comments. We always make sure to check back and answer all your questions that way. And of course, if you do end up trying this, I would love to see what you guys paint. It always makes me so happy to see that. You guys can check out our Jerry's Live Facebook group. It is free to join. Answer that one security question, of course, otherwise you're not let in. But you can post all your artwork there, or you can post it anywhere on any social media platform and just tag us at JerrysArtarama. Amanda will find it and make sure that I see it, because it makes me so happy. But that is it. That was painting hair in acrylics. I hope you guys enjoyed. Of course, make sure you join us next week. Michaela will be back on, and she's actually going to be doing a really fun class on how to fuel your imaginative drawing. So how to edit your reference photos and kind of create new things from a lot of different references, which is going to be so much fun. I'm really excited, and we will see you guys then. Thank you so much. Bye.